welcome to the Cut and the Dry here on the Life Given Radio. This is the show that doesn't mince the hot takes that the Bible lays out for us, cut and dry. I'm your host, Kip and I'm here with my co-host, Isaac Lopez. Isaac, how do you feel about recording at 7 a.m.? Because I gotta say, I'm not a fan.
It's a trial indeed, but we do it for the people. These people, to be exact, and we love them.
Yeah.
Make note of that, people.
We are up at 7 a.m. Okay, both of us, is it fair to say that both of us are kind of night owls?
I'm actually more of a morning
really?
person. Yeah, so okay. I've been...
So Isaac's lying to y'all. This isn't a trial for him.
No, but the earliest I've ever podcasted, and we are already off the show notes. I apologize. The earliest I've ever recorded was 5:30 a.m., and I did one take, and it was miserable because I didn't sound lucid. So I do find it difficult to record podcasts in the morning.
Okay.
Because you have to speak.
Well, I just find it difficult to be alive in the morning. So here we are. But we are here and we are recording. So
that's what counts.
Let's
it's the
get into
heart
it.
that counts, right?
No.
Okay.
That's not, no. In our show today, we're going to continue our discussion of freedom in the framework of civic rights, as well as discussing postmodern culture's aptitude for minimizing the joy God created us for. We'll finish off by leaving you with a couple top toilet tips.
We don't give them the crap. We give them the best crap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what we're here for. And with that, let's get into our first segment, which is indubitable. So again, we're talking about rights. We've been talking a little bit about freedom in the last couple episodes, and we wanted to potentially wrap up our discussion of freedom by talking, maybe by talking about rights. We might have more to say about this, but that is to be determined. So the modern take, the reason we want to discuss this is because the modern take on human rights, in scare quotes, is inclusive of things like abortion, which is murder and is actually a violation of a human right.
Right.
Free healthcare, which involves theft, which is a violation of property rights, which is a human right. Free college, which again has the same problem. It violates property rights. So how did we get to the point where modern's definitions of rights preclude a violation of what are actually rights? How do you think we got there?
Kip, that's a very good question. And I think we've gotten there. And I'm going to just steal your thoughts.
Okay.
I mean, since it is your show, I got to play to the host, right? No, I think you said it in a previous, maybe it was in a prior discussion of freedom, probably. But
okay.
When you put your own will and your own desires in front of others, like when you define your truth as the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
And I think we discussed this in kind of the division that we see in America today, because we've gotten away from God and the rights that we find in God that have kept us grounded. What do you think about that? Do you think that's crazy? I mean,
no,
I'm trying to just echo chamber your thoughts right back at you. But
I think you're spot on.
Okay.
I think you are, yeah. Because ultimately, the only rights that we actually do have, they don't include the things that moderns would typically talk of as rights, right? The only things that are actually human rights are given to us by our Creator, not by the government.
Right.
The government cannot create rights. The only rights that can exist are endowed by our God and Father.
Right.
And the problem lies in the fact that our government has tried to put itself in the place of God and create all of these new rights, these newfangled, exciting rights. But I don't want to get too deep into this. But we've gotten so far down this rabbit trail that it's now okay and expected for me to steal from you to pay my bills, or vice versa, or for the government to legalize the murder of one for the convenience of the other. This is what happens when you stray away from what rights were and are. You know, you can't violate rights to create rights. That it doesn't work that way. And that's ultimately the problem with the modern take on human rights. We want to jump right into our 4 cents because we've got a lot to say here. our topic for our 4 cents is don't settle for less than God created you for. Now, the intended topic for today was going to be talking about gaslighting.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, but we talked about young men in particular being gaslit into thinking that video games and pornography are actually fulfilling.
Right.
And we wanted to talk about that, but a month or so ago, I had written down a list of passages in reference to this topic. And so as I was preparing the show today, I kind of copied and pasted all these passages in, and I was looking at the passages, and I kind of like shuffled them around and put them in a certain order, and I was like, this is a totally different topic, but I'm going to roll with it. So here we are. We're going to start off with our first passage, which is 1 John 2:15 through 17. Isaac, you want to read it for us?
Of course, I'd love to. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. End quote.
It's a beautiful passage. So, there are a few things I want to draw from this before we move on into the rest of the show. Ultimately, there are 2 categories of things that you can love. Things of the Father and things of the world. And I'm going to define the world here as the obsessions of the flesh.
Ooh, okay.
And what I mean by flesh is carnal, unsaved, unregenerate flesh.
Okay.
So hopefully that's enough of a definition. I'm just going to roll with it.
Yeah.
And hope everybody's on the same track. So that's how I'm going to define the world. Every time I bring it up in this segment, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the obsessions of the flesh.
Right.
I'm not talking about creation or this physical planet. Second, I want to define the attribute of the Father most relevant to this discussion.
Okay.
Because obviously we're not defining God in his entirety.
Right.
What I'm doing is trying to define what is most important, what attribute is most important to this discussion. And I think that attribute is the giver of all things, material and spiritual. So those are the 2 categories of things that you can love. What else do you think we can draw from this passage, Isaac?
Well, very simply this. One is everlasting and one is vapor. Solomon said it best at the very end of Ecclesiastes. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. There is only one outcome. And I think Solomon is making that crystal clear. God will judge everything we do. So even if you pick to go one way, it's still going to funnel right back to God, and that's not going to be a fun meeting.
Yeah.
So I think that was a great breakdown, but also the book of Ecclesiastes really does capture the distinction between the two.
Oh, it absolutely does.
2 routes.
Yeah. Ecclesiastes, if you're not in the habit of reading the book of Ecclesiastes like every month or 2, you should start doing it.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, just sit down and read through Ecclesiastes, especially if you're a young man who's working through planning his career, planning what God has called you to in life. Ecclesiastes is the place to start.
Now, Kip, is that your toilet talk tip? Because I think you're giving them extra sense, and they don't deserve that. No.
Well, maybe you're getting 3 toilet tips
talk
today. I probably shouldn't call them toilet tips. I don't know, but
it's the name already puts us in trouble. I mean, this section, and that's my fault. So you're fine.
Here we are, Isaac. Here we are. So the world, as we described it, would like you to think that you can be satisfied by it. We all know that's not true, but here we are. Here we are in postmodern culture, and I'm going to be a little blunt here, Isaac, but bear with me.
Wait, Kip, you are, man, this is a curveball. I'm not used to you being blunt.
Well, you better be ready, brother. you'd think that after reading these couple verses that it would be easy to see this point. The world cannot satisfy you. The obsessions of the flesh cannot satisfy you. They never will. And even if they make you happy, in scare quotes, for 70 years, then it's not going to work out for you for eternity. But postmodern culture has succumbed so completely to this lie that the world can satisfy you, that the devil doesn't even need to try anymore. That's why we have things like pornography. And this isn't just a problem in secular culture. This is a problem in Christian circles. Satan doesn't even need to tempt you with real sex because men of the 21st century are so cucked that they're satiated by watching another man get what they want. Men of this generation are satiated by winning a video game rather than closing $1 million deal to provide for their family and bless their community. What has happened to us? Stop being satisfied by nothing. That is one of the root problems of our culture. And the problem with trying to satisfy yourself with the obsessions of the flesh is twofold. First, your desires will ever increase. You're always going to want more and more and more, and it's going to snowball to a point of nigh on no return. Christ can still save you, but you sure as heck can't. Not that you ever could. But
right.
It gets more and more difficult for you to overcome your own sin in the process of sanctification the further you go, because you're always going to want more. The whatever sin that you were satisfied in doing it on a small scale will ever increase to a grand scale. A small lie will become a big lie. Soft porn will become looking at actual people having sex.
Right.
You know, it always snowballs, and your desires will always keep increasing. It's the law of diminishing returns. You'll never be satisfied by the same level of degeneracy twice in a row. You need to have more. The second problem, the reason why I say the obsessions of the flesh, the problems with trying to satisfy yourself with the obsessions of the flesh is twofold, is that A, your desires will ever increase, but B, here's the real kicker, that which slakes your thirst will ever decrease in value. It's always going to get worse and worse and worse and worse the further you go down the rabbit hole. It's going to be less satisfying, but you're going to want it more and more. I want to, and I use the word slake here on purpose because it's not real fulfillment. You're not fulfilling the desires that God created you to have fulfilled. C.S. Lewis put it this way.
We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased.
It's so true. It is so true. And there are a couple aspects to this. In this segment, I'm focusing a little bit on the real world benefits of being grateful for what you have and taking joy in the Father and all that He has given us. But C.S. Lewis hits on another aspect here, which is the fact that not only are we offered a more joyful life here and now, but the Father is offering us eternal joy. Eternal joy, as well as having a more pleasant 70 years here on planet Earth.
Right.
And here we are. We're still wallowing in our piles of dung because we can't imagine, we can't comprehend how glorious the gift we have been given is.
Right. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I mentioned this earlier, I think, but in our first episode, our Toilet Talk segment was about how young men are living in a dreamland. If you haven't heard that episode, you should go back and listen to it, especially those last 10 minutes or so of that episode, because it does have a little bit to do with what we're talking about here, I think. And we're we're probably going to try to extend that in another episode and dive more deeply into how young men are gaslighting themselves and being gaslit. But I want to press on with a couple verses from Proverbs. Okay. It's Proverbs 21, 20 through 21. Go ahead.
Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. Whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor.
Man, Proverbs is such a wonderful book.
It is very hard-hitting, too.
Yeah, it really is. I won't dive into that. I'm sorry. I was reading one chapter in Proverbs the other day, and I love how it kind of goes off on fools for
roast them
for like 8 verses straight, and then there's one verse, and it's talking about how terrible it is to be foolish, and then there's one verse that says, "You see a man who is wise in his own eyes. There's more hope for a fool than for him." You're just like, oof, that hurts. Yeah. Anywho, totally off topic, but these couple verses are awesome. There are a couple things I want to draw from them. First, if you're wise, your life will be filled with precious things. And if you're foolish, you will gobble up everything in your path. Nothing will satisfy you. Ooh. This is exactly what we've been talking about, and Proverbs puts it so concisely. There's another thing I want to note from this passage, though, which is that righteousness is worth pursuit for its own sake. Notice how in verse 21 it says, "Whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor." Now, I didn't actually delve into the original Hebrew to see if the same word was used here, but it's communicating the idea that pursuing righteousness will give you righteousness, or at least in the English. And I think that's interesting to note. I won't talk about it a ton more here, but second, life and honor are side benefits of pursuing righteousness. Proverbs tells us that a fulfilling life, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's house. And whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor. All of these things are side benefits, real tangible benefits of the pursuit of righteousness. Now, I want to emphasize here, no matter what you obtain, if you are foolish, if you're unwilling to submit to your Creator, nothing will ever be enough to fill the cavity of your desires. The obsessions of the flesh, as we described it, will always call for more. And the end of verse 20 puts it so concisely. Precious oil and treasure are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it.
Right. I don't have much to add to that. I think that's, I mean, when you sent me the show notes, I was like, that is really good. And I had a little note, because I think you could boil this down to a fruit of the Spirit, and that's self-control. I've experienced this recently with portion controlling, because I've been trying to cut back on the wedding weight, which I was joking about in the first episode, but it was a real thing. Like I need to cut some weight, and so I went out and started exercising like I used to, and started doing a few of those things that actually, before I even got back to eating, I discovered that I was more self-controlled. Like when my family has these big Sabbath meals every Saturday night, and my mom makes this massive spread, and it's really easy to, eat a little more than I should. But now I'm eating one helping, because there's just been some training and exercising that has limited my diet, and then I've been slowly cutting back on what I've eaten, right? Yeah. And then, so I only eat one helping, right? And some people may think, oh man, that's a waste of a good meal. I actually enjoy the meal much more because I'm slowly intaking my food, rather than gobbling down 2 or 3 or 4 helpings. But I think that it comes back to self-control, because the ability to discipline yourself and also to pursue righteousness, because that's not what in our fallen nature, that's not what we want to do. But pursuing righteousness you will find righteousness along the way, because it's part of that discipline,
Yeah.
So I mean that's all I think I have to add. But
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I wanna change tack a little bit and dive into what this looks like in real life. What does joy in life look like? What does taking pride in your work and taking joy in what your Creator has given you and taking advantage of it in the best way possible? What does that look like? And for that, I want to turn to Matthew 25. Isaac, do you want to read through verse 20, and then I'll take it from there?
Yeah, sounds good. For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them.
And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you get delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping what you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So there's a lot in this passage, and we're probably going to read this again in a future episode and talk more about it because there's so much. But for the purposes of this show, I just want to draw a few things out. First, I think we can deduce from this parable that everyone has been given a certain number of talents, in scare quotes. By this I mean everyone has a certain set of spiritual gifts, physical abilities, and mental aptitudes. You got these abilities from someone, and it wasn't you, it was God. Don't throw them away. Don't bury them.
Right.
That doesn't end well. The next thing I want to draw from this passage, though, is that there's no need to be ashamed of having 2 talents instead of 5, right? Not everyone is as well equipped as the other, but the servant who had 2 talents and ended up with 4 received the same praise that the servant who had 5 talents and ended up with 10 did. Isn't that interesting to note? God doesn't fault you for not being as gifted as your neighbor. He knows how gifted you are. He knows what abilities you have. He knows what you're able to accomplish. So do it. Doesn't matter how much it is. Do what you're able to do. That's the point of this parable. God, next up, God has not only given us abilities, but he has given us real meaningful work to do. We've not only been given our handful of talents, but we've been given by God the agency to actually produce eternal impact on creation. Think about that for a moment. That's kind of insane. Later on in this parable, when the slothful servant is speaking to the master, he says, the servant says, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? Because the servant is basically saying, look, you don't even need to do any farming and you reap a harvest.
Right.
And you gave me this talent. I didn't want to lose it.
Yeah.
Right? Seems pretty reasonable. He's talking to the creator of all things who can make something out of nothing. And he's like, you entrusted me with this. I didn't want to mess it up, so I just buried it.
Yeah.
But God doesn't want us to do that. He wants us to take what we've been given, what has been created out of nothing, and he wants us to actually make an impact on eternity.
Right.
If that's not motivating, I don't know what is.
Amen.
Isn't that crazy, Isaac?
That is
gets
nuts.
me every time.
I mean, just really, when you play out the impact of this passage, I'm just thumbing back through this passage because it's long, but it's such an amazing story and parable. It's one of those things that I don't really have much to add except that when you look back at it, when he gave them their talents, right, and they went away trading according to their abilities. So that means you have men or servants that know what their talents are. And I would just say that you need to be able to recognize where your strengths are. And maybe not play around so much trying to become a jack of all trades, but really working at what God has given you to be able to do, or recognizing your weaknesses to be able to go out and to trade according to your ability. But yeah, I mean, it's just fantastic. I don't have anything else to add. You hit everything on the nose there.
I mean, yeah, I think that's an interesting note, Isaac. But I would also like to add, if you're like me and you're not good at anything specifically, and you are a jack of all trades, that's okay too. Just use that well.
Okay, I've got a story, and I think we have enough time. I think we're making plenty of time. And also it's 8 a.m., so I get some slack. But Kip and I were roommates 4 years ago now. And this was, we both attended New St. Andrews for a time together. And we also lived with a couple other guys. And I came in, coming out of high school, I felt like I was a fairly bright student. I'm attending New St. Andrews. I had, just felt a little puffed up. But then I got humbled real quick. I got some humble pie very quickly. And in part, it was because I was living with you three. All three of you had the ability to make Dean's List. Very.
I didn't, but I could have maybe.
Well, because you're also working a butt ton. Like you were doing a lot of other stuff, and that being said, you recognized your talents, and you actually went and started a car shop, right?
Herberado.
Which, by the way, I'm gonna plug here. They just did a ton of work on my car this last week, nice. Fantastic business. Jonathan Erber runs that really well, like a well-oiled machine. One could say that. Wow. And Kip started that company, and it's just really cool. And Kip may say that he's a jack of all trades, which I think he is, but you also know that you're a go-getter and you got to get out and go get. You're not one to just sit down and hey, let's maybe spend 20 years in college, right, getting a doctorate. Rather, your talents are better spent actually doing stuff. You know. So I mean, you could say that there's an argument to be made on both sides of the coin, but you realized your abilities, right, and you went out and took care of that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Isaac. That's encouraging and very nice of you. The bottom line of this whole segment, though, Isaac's laughing at me because I'm just back to the point.
No, because I took us off on a rabbit trail, which I try to avoid so much in my class. But anyway, here we are.
But cutting Isaac off. The bottom line of this whole segment is this. It's encapsulated in Psalm 37:4, which says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." What a beautiful verse. It's saying to delight yourself in the giver of all things, the Almighty God and Father of all creation, and all of your wants will be fulfilled. What a promise.
Right.
Remember how I said that the obsessions of the flesh have two downsides? There are two sides to the coin of how bad it is.
Right.
Your desire ever increases with no fulfillment, and the things that satiate you ever decrease in value. Well, similarly, there are two sides of the coin for those who embrace with gratitude the giver of all things. Your desire also ever increases, and the things that fulfill those desires ever increase right alongside you. How could it be any other way?
Right.
If your obsession isn't with the flesh, but with the giver and creator of all things, and he wants to get to know you better too, how else would it happen? As you want to know him better, he's going to show himself to you more. And that is going to fill that ever-increasing desire. So it's the same thing on both sides. Your desire ever increases, but on the side of the obsessions of the flesh, the value of what you're getting ever decreases.
Right.
It always gets worse, and you never are fully satisfied. Whereas if you embrace the giver of all things, you will always get more, and you'll always want more, but it'll always be there to fulfill you.
Amen.
And that's the promise of Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. That's really what sanctification's about, and that's what humans were created to do. To know their creator, to learn to love him, and to learn to let him reveal himself to them.
Amen.
That's all that it is.
Yeah.
So with that, do we want to move on to toilet talk, brother?
Let's get it to it.
Let's get it. Okay. What we're switching up toilet talk a little bit. We want to each bring you kind of a brief practical tip. So Isaac's going to start us off today with his toilet top tip.
So my toilet top tip, gee whiz, is build and don't give a crap. Chris Wiley tweeted the other day, one of my old mentors taught me that there are 4 stages to a man's life. 1, start something. 2, build it. 3, help others. 4, cut the crap. When you get the 4th stage, you just don't have time to fool around. So I love this. I love this quote because I think this goes really well with the parable of the talents that we were talking about just a few minutes ago. When you recognize your abilities, get down to business and don't wait. That means a lot of things. Don't wait around. If you have interests, pursue them. I think kind of going back to the story that we were telling about our friendship or our being roommates a few years ago, you saw your interest and you pursued it, right? You didn't wait around. That includes chasing a woman. We are trying to push to reach young men on this podcast. And so I know plenty of young men that have kind of danced around waiting for the right moment or for the right opportunity to present itself to go chase a woman. And life sometimes passes them by very quickly. And you might miss a great opportunity there. And that also goes for work. That also goes for building a home. And once you've started something, you need to be able to finish it. You need to start building on it. Because I've talked to, right now you and I are doing stuff that require motivation. So podcasting for free is just something that you've got to be able to be motivated to and lay the groundwork for future stuff. I've talked to a number of people in the last year and a half, in the last couple of years, writers, people who are aspiring writers, people who are aspiring podcasters, all of these things, and they're waiting for the right opportunity to come instead of creating their own opportunity and starting something, right? And then once you start something, your word and reputation is everything at the onset of that. And every time you publish something or put something out, that's just furthering your reputation. So I'm kind of getting away from what Chris Wiley was tweeting there. But basically, you really need to get to the cut the crap stage fast so you can help more people. That's my tip.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% spot on. That was a helpful tip for me. My top tip is don't be biblically illiterate.
That's pretty good.
So I'm leaving social media here in a week and a half or so, not because of this. I had already planned on doing this, but
you burned a lot of bridges.
I kind of did that. So here's something I saw on Facebook the other day that was just like the icing on the cake. I was just like, I'm so tired of people let me tell you something, Isaac.
Okay.
I'm tired of people who are stupid. You get me?
I think we all are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I saw. It was just one of those little images with text. And it said, when I say I want a biblical wife, what people think I mean, I want a wife who is passive and subservient. What I really mean, I want a wife who is totally willing to drive a tent spike into a tyrant's head should the opportunity arise. So frustrating. Maybe I shouldn't have put this in because like it's getting me worked up and angry while I'm sitting here.
People get the unfiltered Kip. That's what we're bringing.
So dumb. A wife who lives her life patterned on the scripture is neither subservient and passive nor a bloodthirsty killer. For goodness sake.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Jael did good when she killed Sisera.
Right.
But in what idiot's mind does Jael describe the biblical pattern for womanhood?
Right.
In the biblical pattern, it's a man's job to do the man killing. Mm-hmm. And the only reason Jael ended up in that situation is because Barak was a little baby and didn't do it himself.
True.
I'm gonna cool it there. I'm just not gonna say anything else.
Well, I'm gonna push you. I'm gonna push you on this.
Okay.
Because I mean, and this is probably one of the reasons you're leaving social media. Because you just told me, like, I just saw your Facebook post about this a couple of days ago, and we haven't really had time to really dig into it. But I think one of the issues of social media is sometimes it lacks nuance.
Yeah.
So do you think that the person who posted this, do you think that he was talking about women with just backbone? Because I've heard people quote Jael multiple times when it comes to biblical womanhood. And obviously, I don't want my wife driving a tent peg through a tyrant's head. I want to do that. You know, like I would rather be the man.
While he's awake.
While he's
and
awake.
He's about to shoot you in the face. You
know? And I have a tent peg, and that's going to work out if he has a gun.
Yes, sir. Because you're a real man.
Just bring that little head over here. But anyway, so I've heard people try to nuance this. Before. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think it is kind of foolish to assume that Jael is the perfect woman, right? Like, we don't want all of our women modeled after her.
Right. Okay. So are you saying nuance in the sense that there is something to learn from Jael, and they're not trying to like say it's perfect,
yes.
but there's
Yeah.
I think I get what you're saying there.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm working on teaching Karis how to use all of my firearms in case that is necessary.
Right.
But what I'm trying to get at is the last part of this quote, and I get that I might be missing some nuance, but when it says, I want a wife who is totally willing to drive a tent spike into a tyrant's head, should the opportunity arise. Like, it's a very like motivated, bloodthirsty woman is what this post is describing. Okay. But even if I'm wrong there, the bottom line, what I'm trying to drive at is it's my job and it's your job to kill the tyrant. And it's Ruth's job and it's Karis's job to let us protect them. Okay. And if we don't do our jobs, that's on us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if for whatever reason we are physically unable, say we're dead, to do our jobs, then I do hope and pray that Karis is able to do what she needs to do. But I also hope and pray that she never does.
Right. Amen. Okay.
So,
I think that I figured that's what you're getting at, but I just wanted to push that around. That's one of the reasons we started this podcast, is so that way we aren't limited to 140 characters. Right, like on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I brought that up.
Yeah. Thanks for interjecting, because I was getting a little worked up. And
I mean, I'm only here as a buffer, so that's my job.
Isaac's only here to keep me calm and intelligible. That's what's going on. He said I'm not usually. No. Before we sign off, if you've listened to us for this long, I hope you're interested in what we have to say. If so, please feel free to share this show with your friends. Give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts. Isaac is working on getting a Discord channel started up in the near future, hopefully this next week, which will allow us to potentially bring people in live into our recordings for discussion, or at the very least answer your questions on the show.
Hop in here?
Yeah, go for
like
it,
this. This is going to be a really fun opportunity. The goal is to drop it on Thanksgiving Day, so we'll have a couple fun things dropping on Thanksgiving Day, including a podcast special, but that's just on the channel. But first and foremost, this Discord chat will allow us to do to expand the show and what we're doing with it. So like maybe some extra behind the scenes content that if you're in the Discord channel, you'll be able to interact with. You'll probably still be able to listen to it wherever, but it's going to be like a live radio show where we get some interaction with callers or interaction with chatters. So I'm really excited about this idea.
Yeah, I think it'll be super fun. And on the plus side, since we have just started this podcast, there might only be 2 or 3 people on this Discord channel. So you're going to get some fun quality time with Isaac and I.
Right. And probably like, let's say 4 or 5, because 2 of them will probably be our mothers.
Oh,
that's what I'm probably thinking. Right. But the other 3 will definitely be like some, it'll be some really good quality time.
Yeah, we're excited about it.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So I do want to leave you with a closing thought. This episode has really emphasized the fact that everything you have is a gift from God. Your rights, your freedoms, your abilities, and your ambitions. That's what this whole organization is all about. God's kingdom is built by those who recognize what they have been given. Gratitude is the key to every task that we are called to. You must have gratitude before you can do anything, and I mean anything, for the kingdom of God.
It's so true. It really is the crux of it. It's the bottom line. Gratitude is the building block for anything in God's kingdom.
Amen.
And you can take this all the way down to literally the foundation. If you don't have gratitude for the faith that you have been given in Christ, you have literally nothing. So, with that, for the cut and the dry on the Life Given Radio, this is Kip and Isaac signing off.